Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar. I am Stella Beard with Kentucky Spin, and today we have a very special guest. Katie Wolf-Whaley is joining us, and I'll be introducing her in just a few minutes. We're going to be talking about employment first and what it means in your life. Before we get started, though, I would like to just kind of go over a little bit of housekeeping with you and also tell you just a little bit about Kentucky Spin. First of all, on your right-hand side, you will see a dashboard. That dashboard is very important throughout our presentation today. There is something called a question box. It has a little arrow, and if you click on that, it will expand, and you can type a question in there for Katie. I have Michaela from our office on the call also today, and she's going to help monitor those questions. So please feel free to type your questions there. We also have a chat box, but not everyone is able to see that. But if you are one of the ones that can, please, you can also use that chat box to type a question. So please feel free to do that. We will be monitoring those. You will also see a tab that says handouts. When you click that little arrow, it should provide a drop-down box, and in that you are able to download the PowerPoint and a couple of handouts that Katie has provided for today. But I also wanted to let you know that we will be sending a follow-up email, and you will get all of the handouts later this afternoon. So if you don't want to take the time to download those now, that is totally fine. But please go ahead and do that if you would like, or you can wait for the email later this afternoon. I want to tell you just a few minutes, just a little bit about Kentucky Spin. Kentucky Spin is the Kentucky Special Parent Involvement Network. We are the Parent Training and Information Center for the state of Kentucky. There is one in every state. Some states have more than one. Kentucky has one, and that is us. And we are actually funded by the U.S. Department of Education under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. We have actually been the Parent Training and Information Center since 1988. And that's when Kentucky first received the PTI grant. And we just received notice about a month and a half ago that we have been funded for an additional 5 years. So that's great. That allows us to continue to provide training, information, and support for children and youth with all types of disabilities. And it says birth through 26, but we always work with all families, all folks with disabilities, regardless of their age. And we work with parents, families, and professionals. It's much easier for me to tell you what we do not do than what we do, but we do not act as attorneys. So we are not going to be giving out legal advice to anyone. However, we empower families to effectively advocate for their children, which we feel is more important if we're able to provide them with the tools and resources that they need to be a better advocate for their child. That to me is very empowering. And also we provide peer support to help families access needed information and resources. One of the things that I love about being a part of Kentucky Spin is our staff and consultants are all either parents who have a child or a young adult with an intellectual developmental disability, have a disability themselves, or could possibly be a sibling of someone who has a disability. I myself have a 24-year-old with a disability, so I have been involved in the world of special education and advocacy for many, many years. So I love the fact that we're able to provide that to families. Last March, when our world seemed to change, we here at Kentucky Spin jumped right in and went to a virtual platform. And since March of 2020, we have been hosting webinars every Tuesday and every Thursday, almost without exception. And so I love this slide right here. It says, together we can accomplish great things for our children. And none of us have all the answers, and we're all working through this pandemic and adjusting as we go. And one of the things that I've learned through this is how important collaboration is and working with other folks around the state to still continue to get information out to families, to professionals during these crazy times. So I'm very happy today that we have Katie Wolf-Whaley with us, who I can also say is my dear friend. Katie and I have been friends for quite a while. We've been in a lot of circles together. And so I'm very honored that she is going to be presenting to us today. She is the project director of the Supported Employment Training Project with the Human Development Institute. I'm trying to multitask right now, and sometimes I do really good, and other times I get a little scattered. I am going to give Katie the reins here, and so I was in the process of trying to do that, and of course, then I got all flustered. So, Katie, I want to make sure you can hear me, and there's your screen. So, yay, it does work. How are you doing?
I'm good. Hopefully you can hear me.
We can. We can. Did you turn your webcam on? Because I don't see you right now.
I
There
am
you
doing it
are.
right now. Is it working?
Awesome. It's there. I see you. You look
Very
great.
good.
Okay. Thank you so much for being with us today, and take it away.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I hope you are, if you are watching this, then you must still have electricity, which is a wonderful thing. Hope you are safe and warm. We practice this, I promise. For some reason now, all I can see is me. Oh, there we go. There's my slides. Good morning.
I got ready to say, I see your slide, so
Okay, perfect.
I see you, so we're good there.
It's been a year and we're still figuring some of these things out. I know. See, we're always learning, always figuring new things. I think one thing we've learned is we can all learn new tasks. And that is an important thing to keep in mind as we go through this morning. Stella, thank you so much for having me this morning. I'm excited to be here, and congratulations on your renewed funding. That's very exciting. I do direct the State Supported Employment Training Project. I work at the Human Development Institute at UK. And so I get to talk to people who provide supported employment a lot. I also am involved and on the board of Kentucky APSE, National APSE, the association that promotes employment first. I also am currently chair the State Employment First Council. So I'll tell you a little bit about that in a minute. But I'm really excited to be here. I can't tell who is here. I can't see your names or anything, but it sounds like we have a mix of family members and professionals. And so I apologize that I don't know how much you might know about this already. So this is just kind of a basic overview of why this stuff matters, and then how you work the system to help people that you care about get a job. So the biggest reason it matters, I think, is because of our society and our culture. We all live here in the United States, and as you know, when students go through school, when they finish, there's that question of what do you do, right? And so what do kids do when they leave high school? I will put in the caveat that, when we're in the middle of a worldwide pandemic, things are a little bit different, but in general, because hopefully one day we'll get back to some version of normal again. Kids, right, they go to college, they join the military, they get a job. So this question of what do you do is really, really powerful in our society. Whoever we're talking to, it's kind of that first thing you do when you meet people is what's your name, and then there's that next question of what you do. And so part of Employment First is helping adults make sure they have an answer to that question, because it in a lot of ways shows your place in the world, where you fit, and helps you to be a part of those conversations in that regular adult life in society. And so some of you might have younger kids, which then gets to that question of what do you want to be? And just the power of making sure that we're asking that question to all of our children, including our children who happen to have a disability and students who are in special education services. Because I think sometimes they get left out of being asked that question the same way that other students and other kids do. And it matters because right now our disability statistics are not good, right? They're never great. Here's a snapshot that was put together by Kentucky Works of disability statistics across the country in Kentucky and in the Bluegrass region where I happen to be. And so we want to do something about that. And there's civil rights, right? We have lots of money in our society. We have money in our society that goes to support adults with disabilities. What Employment First is about is making sure that those dollars are there. So when people are receiving publicly funded services, employment is that first and preferred option. It's that idea, just hear what, so this image was from several years ago. It was an anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and I happened to be in Washington, D.C. with my daughter, who was a middle schooler at the time, and the youth group went on a mission project. So yes, I spent a whole week with middle schoolers and I survived. So that was very exciting. And they had painted these staircases all over DC with images of disability rights activists and quotes. And so this was one with Judy Heumann. If you've seen Crip Camp, she has become a much more household name, thankfully, for lots of people in this past year, who says disability only becomes a tragedy when society fails to provide the things we need to lead our lives. And I believe supports to good employment are one of those things that we need to lead our lives, because employment brings so much to our life: connection, value, meaning, a paycheck so we can afford the things that we want, like a place to live and getting around and food and games and a new purse or whatever it is that you're wanting. And it was really exciting in June of 2020 that Governor Beshear signed an executive order stating that it is the policy of the Commonwealth of Kentucky that competitive integrated employment in the community shall be considered the first and primary option for persons with disabilities of working age who desire to become employed. What was especially exciting about this is this actually Kentucky's second executive order. So we've now had, an executive order is time limited, so it was for 2 years. So before the first one expired, this was signed. So we've now had the same language in executive orders from 2 different governors of 2 different political parties, which I think is a really powerful message, especially today, about the importance of employment first and the gravity of this for Kentuckians. I was also incredibly excited to see this video come out. So I'm going to try and play a video, and I can't promise that her lips are going to match all of the words because of internet, but I'm going to hope that you can hear what she has to say. So it is, it's a pretty short video.
Hello, this is Lieutenant Governor Jacqueline Coleman. As a former public school teacher and administrator, I know that education is one of the greatest gifts we can give our children, one that has incredible power to equip them with the knowledge and skills they need for a successful life. Governor Beshear and I are committed to making a positive difference in the education of our students. This means that all of us must do our very best to make sure that all students, not just some, are ready for what comes next after they leave our public school system. This includes preparing each student, including students with significant disabilities, for successful, life-sustaining employment. That is why the policy of the Commonwealth of Kentucky is that competitive, integrated employment in the community is considered the first and primary option for persons with disabilities who want to become employed, and why Governor Beshear issued the Employment First executive order last June. This policy extends to students with disabilities of working age, including students with significant disabilities, and would help Kentucky build an economy that works for all of its citizens. This is a Team Kentucky effort. Together, we can ensure that the necessary tools, processes, and supports are in place to improve and enhance services to students with significant disabilities. We owe it to Kentuckians with disabilities to provide job opportunities that break down barriers and strengthen our families. We owe it to them to continue to develop a workforce in which no one is underestimated or left behind. None of us can do it alone, but we can all do it together. Hello, this is Lieutenant Governor.
Sorry, she gets to stop talking now. I was really excited to see that video come out and be posted, just to show that commitment from the highest levels in our Commonwealth, that everybody be given the opportunity to find work if that is what they want to do. And so one of the main premise too included in Employment First is this presumption of employability. It is the belief that everybody has something to offer that is worthy of pay. These images are all Kentuckians who happen to have a disability, have significant impact of disability in the lingo of our field, who are employed in different jobs across our Commonwealth. So I like this bottom statement that the question is not whether a person can work, but where, right? So it's not like these are all good jobs for somebody with a disability. They're a good job for that particular person. And we're going to talk about some of the steps of what it took to figure that out for each person. But you couldn't just mix them all around, right? And have people from the child care center go to the hair salon, up to the YMCA, and to the car dealership and expect it to work out. So it really is a matter of where someone can work, and how we think about employment can make a really huge difference in figuring out a good job for somebody, and then whether there is success, because that good job for somebody makes all the difference in the world for all of us, especially someone who has a lot of considerations in their life. And so we think about employment for people with significant disabilities, not just as, well, but they have to compete with other people in the labor market, right? And we're going to talk about competitive integrated employment and some of these definitions, but what does somebody have to contribute? Not just are they going to be able to compete against other people? Because too often when we think about, well, how can somebody compete and what kind of job can they get? Folks are on the left in those typical entry-level service jobs, which might be a good fit for somebody, but for a lot of people with various impact of significant disability, those cleaning, cart pushing, table wiping type of jobs, for lots of reasons, tend to not be a very good fit. There's high turnover. It's difficult physical work. And so people either struggle to become independent, or aren't successful and don't work. And so rather than thinking, where can someone compete, we think, what does someone have to offer? Because some folks aren't going to be able to compete for those jobs, right? They're going to have a hard time beating out other people in a job application process, even for those entry-level service jobs. And so they tend to get left with nothing. And we don't want people's options to be nothing or a not very good job fit. And so the critical part is, how do we get beyond that kind of thinking to figure good things out for people? And so how does that work here in Kentucky? If you have questions, I have been told, I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to see them if you put them in one of your question boxes, but I think they will let me know. And once I see those or I'm notified about it, I am happy to answer questions as we go, because I want to make sure that you're getting information you want. Stella also mentioned the handout. So you do have my slides. You have two other documents explaining this idea of employment first. One is a document by APSE, the National Association of People Supporting Employment First, which has a lot of words and details information. The other is a document that was done in partnership with SABE and the Green Mountain Self-Advocates, a couple of self-advocacy groups, and it is a plain language document with images as well on what Employment First is and what it means. If there's other resources you're interested in, put it in the box and I will see if I can find that before Stella sends that email out this afternoon. So I'm happy to help with that as well. All right, so the system here in Kentucky. And of course, people don't have to use publicly funded services to find a job, right? But if you do, and there are supports there, everybody starts with the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation. That is where services begin. And here are some of the different services that they provide. Supported employment is for whom the term would be most significantly disabled, most significant impacted disability. That's what I spend most of my time, almost all of my time, teaching about. And VR, Voc Rehab, Office of Vocational Rehabilitation, all the same thing. They use CRP, another acronym, Community Rehabilitation Provider. So our state Voc Rehab agency contracts out to private agencies to do supported employment. And I mention that because sometimes I talk with families or other people and they'll say, well, who's your VR counselor? And they'll name the job coach or the employment specialist. So Kentucky, somebody will have a VR case and then an employment specialist through a private agency as well that does the direct work of supported employment with them. They also offer employment and retention, also uses these outside agencies. Employment specialists, it is a short-term service where supported employment is much more in depth. and really getting to know somebody and figuring out what a good job could be, and then provides ongoing supports, checking in with people throughout that job. Employment and retention helps somebody get a job, and after 90 days, that case is closed and there aren't any continued supports. They also have job placement services, which uses in-house VR employees, and they have rehabilitation technologists across the state. So if somebody's going to need assistive technology, need some adaptive equipment to be successful on the job, but they're just not quite sure what it's going to take, like, this is what I want to do, this is what my workspace looks like, how do I make this work for me? There are rehabilitation technologists who can go out and help with that across the state. And so that's a wonderful service that VR also has, that rehab counselor can help connect people with. Our state DIDD office, I have my letters in the wrong order. I apologize about that. Some state general funds can support supported employment. The bigger funding source comes through our waiver services, Michelle Peace, SCL, and acquired brain injury. The brain injury waivers can also provide ongoing supports for supported employment. Within our Division of Behavioral Health, they utilize what's called IPS supported employment, individual placement and supports. It is a model of supported employment that is specific to people with serious mental illness and or substance abuse. And so there are some agencies across the state who have been deemed IPS providers. And so you would go to Voc Rehab and they would refer you to an IPS program. So I did have one question about what types of jobs are available for people with disabilities. And so I'm going to put that question off for a minute because we're going to talk about why there really isn't an answer to that question. Because as with everybody, it really depends upon who that person is, what their interests are, what they're good at, and what their support needs are as to what job could be good. So that's what I love about that earlier image with all the different people, is what makes it a really good job for one person would really make it a disaster for somebody else, because of all of people's unique interests and their unique support needs and their conditions for success. And the beauty of supported employment is that when done well, it takes all of those things into consideration to then figure out not just what type of task would be good for somebody, but what kind of business, what kind of culture, what kind of lighting and pace and personality styles and all that kind of stuff are we looking for in a business? Because a lot of times when it comes to people with a significant impact of disability, it's all that other stuff about a business that matters as much or even more than that actual work task that someone is doing. But the first way to get to that type of information is to go through the VR process. So I apologize for stumbling over my words. One, I don't get to talk to a lot of people very often anymore these days because I'm at home all of the time. And two, I'm trying to read some questions while I do this. Okay, so there's a question about if somebody's not yet on a waiver list, how do you get on that waiver list? I believe you go to your area. I'm gonna let Stella answer that later because I'm gonna say it wrong. I think you'd go to your local comprehensive care center. But we're going to make sure that we get you that information. And you don't have to have a waiver in order to get supported employment. That is a really big, thank you. Watch the chat box and you're going to get an answer to that question to make sure that it is said right, because I talk some about Medicaid waivers and I promise to never be the final authority on anything that has to do with Medicaid. That is not my area. But even if somebody already has a Medicaid waiver, you still have to start with Voc Rehab for employment services because Medicaid is always the payer of last resort, and Voc Rehab will pay for those upfront costs of initially finding a job. But I do want to make sure that you realize that you don't have to have a Medicaid waiver in order to get supported employment. You can go with just VR funding and with that agency that they'll refer you to. If you're coming out of high school and you've had transition services through VR, then there should be that intentional referral introduction to VR into an adult provider agency. If someone has gotten pre-employment transition services while in high school, those are funded by VR, but you don't have to apply for voc rehab services for that, right? There is this idea of presumption of eligibility. And so just because a student had access to pre-ETS, pre-employment transition services, they would then still need to apply for VR services once they actually want help in finding a job. Here is the phone number. There's a 502 and a 1-800 number where you can call. If you know the number of your local office, you can call there directly. Otherwise, this is the main number, and they will let you know the number for your own local office. I will tell you that people are not in the local office right now. VR offices, as I understand it, across the state are still remote. But if you leave a message, they are checking those and can get back to you. But everything will be done remotely these days. So you do apply for VR services. Here are the eligibility requirements. The vocational rehabilitation counselor will be the person who oversees your case within VR. If you receive services through other settings and funding sources, that's fine. You might have a case manager here, but then you're also going to get a VR counselor at voc rehab. Anyone with a disability can get help from voc rehab. Yes, that's what I meant by there are lots of services besides just supported employment. Supported employment is for people with the most significant impact of disability, but vocational rehabilitation in general, these are the qualifications, these top bullets on your slide. And people with a lesser impact of disability can still qualify for service. It just might not be supported employment. It might be a different type of service to help somebody obtain or maintain employment. And so that can include job search help, of course. It can also include education. Sometimes it's college education, sometimes it's VOTEC education, sometimes it's getting people the equipment they need to be able to go to work. They also have a whole driver rehab division where they can help people learn to drive so that they can get to work, where they can help adapt vehicles so that you can get to work, all those kind of things. So there's lots of other things that they can provide as well to help somebody be able to get up, get ready, get out of their home and get to a work site. The VR counselor is the person who determines which service somebody will get, right? So whether it's supported employment or employment and retention or job placement or school or driver rehab or whatever it is, the counselor is the person who manages all of that. If you are getting supported employment or a service that uses one of these outside agencies, then you're also going to have an employment specialist. Sometimes they're referred to as a job coach. This is the person at that CRP, the Community Rehabilitation Program. We often refer to them as provider agencies. That's the person that's really going to be getting to know the job seeker and help them actually find a job. VR in Kentucky pays those agencies for the service of supported employment. And so there are service fee memos, there are payment agreements, they have to be a vendor with the state in order to provide that service. But basically, VR contracts those employment services out to these provider agencies. So you have your VR counselor, and then you will also have an employment specialist. If you have been through the school system, then you are familiar with IEPs. Once you get to the VR agency, they have IPEs. I think the letters are so similar just to keep us on our toes because you're not tired enough as someone who has made it through the school system. But the IPE is an individual plan for employment. That's what VR is looking to get. It's that job goal. What kind of work are you looking for? And they are paying that employment specialist, another agency, to help them figure out how to set that IPE, that job goal, and then to help you find the job. So there's that partnership between VR and the employment agency, the disability agency. After WIOA was passed, all VR services or jobs that are found have to meet this definition of competitive integrated employment. I'm going to go over it in just a second. You could probably spend a day talking about it and debating it, but basically what it is saying is that if VR is going to close a case as a positive employment outcome, help somebody get a job, use those dollars to get a job, it has to meet this definition. You have to be paid at least minimum wage. There's no sub-minimum wage in VR assisted employment services, and it needs to be comparable to non-disabled coworkers in similar position. So it's at least minimum wage, and it needs to be prevailing wage, not other people come in at $15 an hour, but if you have a disability, you come in at minimum wage kind of thing. And it needs to be integrated. It's a workplace that's inclusive of people with and without disabilities, and that somebody who happens to have a disability has the opportunity to interact with non-disabled coworkers as much as anybody else would have the opportunity to interact with coworkers. And then employment, right? That you are a regular employee of this company. You are paid by that employer. You have the same, expectations, performance standards, and benefits that any other employee in that business would have. If somebody happens to have a Medicaid waiver, MichelleP, SCL, and the brain injury waivers include supported employment. They both have waiting lists. So she can help you figure out how to get on a waiting list for a waiver. They're going to make sure you have that correct information, but the waiting lists are long, as you probably are aware. And right now in Kentucky, these two IDD waivers have different regulations, different billing, and so they, on the provider end, they work differently. My hope would be that as a person who wants to go to work, you wouldn't see much of a difference, but on the back end for that agency, things are different. I do put this caveat of MichelleP in here that I often hear because there are limits to hours of service. If you are a family member and have someone who wants to go to work and they're already using all of those units, those hours that are allotted in their MichelleP waiver, something's going to have to give to get employment service in there. And so, when we grow up and are adults and it's time to go to work, I think a lot of us then have to put some other things aside to make priority for employment. And so it's the same in that system as well. I mentioned this on the mental health side. If someone has a serious mental illness and or a substance abuse issue, and that's the disability reason that they're going to VR and looking for assistance and having a job, then VR is going to refer you to one of the IPS providers across the state. And that employment specialist becomes a part of that full treatment team. And so they are able to talk with therapists and case managers and prescribers and all of the other people in that person's treatment team as well to make sure that it's a really good approach. We want that to happen in the IDD system as well. There are more safeguards, if you will, the way IPS runs to make sure that happens on the mental health side. The reality is we know that too often people have been screened out of employment, right? For whatever reason, someone gets through the school system and either there isn't a good introduction or people just aren't sure what work could look like, and so other things are available, right? We want somewhere for our son or daughter to go where they can be all day, where we know they're going to be safe and protected and have something to do, and so we look at other things such as day activity centers or support groups or other things that they can do besides employment, because we're just not sure how that's going to work out. So there are lots of reasons for that low employment rate of people with disabilities. But what I want to make sure that people understand goes back to that idea of that presumption of employability, that everybody has something to offer that is worthy of pay. I'm not going to lie, it's not as easy to figure out for everybody. And so customized employment is one method of helping somebody get a job that can help be much more flexible with the process. I talk to people and I talk to families who really want good things for their son or daughter or their brother or sister, or case managers or other people, whether you're a professional or a family member. But it's easy to think, I know what I do for a living, I know what my partner does for a living, I know what my siblings do and my neighbors and my friends. As much as I fiercely love my child and want them to be employed, I don't know that I see them being able to apply for those kind of jobs or be able to do those kind of jobs. And so customized employment gives us a framework for thinking about work in a different way. It really, really looks at what this person has to offer, what it's going to take for them to be successful. And then that employment specialist intentionally goes out and talks to businesses to find a place that has need of what that person has to offer, that's going to have as much of that other fit stuff to meet those conditions for success. It is a flexible approach, and it negotiates, customizes, creates a new position that uses what the person has to offer and fits the needs of that business that did not exist before that employment specialist went in and talked to them. Okay, so we're talking beyond pre-existing job descriptions to really get at what are the needs of your business and how can this person be of benefit, and making sure that it's a good fit for both of them. It very much happens one person at a time, one employer at a time. Somebody had a question in here asking if there are incentives for employers to hire individuals with disabilities in Kentucky. Hopefully you're getting a good employee, right? Employers need good employees. Employers need employees who are going to show up, who are going to do the work, who are going to try their best. And that one benefit that can come for someone who receives services through one of these disability employment agencies is you have someone to help make sure that it goes well. If you talk to hiring managers and say, how many of your new employees start on the first day and hit the ground running and don't need any extra help from you? They're probably going to chuckle at you and roll their eyes, because all new employees need some additional help. And someone with a significant disability might need more help, but there is that employment specialist that can help provide that. They can help connect back to the rehab tech to say, okay, somebody might need a screen reader or a larger screen, or they might need a way to raise the desk for someone to fit under it, or some adaptive equipment or software, but I know somebody that can help figure that out, so they can be that resource person for an employer. So there are those soft things that are benefits to employers. There is the WOTC, the Work Opportunity Tax Credit. There are not extra benefits in Kentucky than right now. But there are some federal tax credits that can be a deal sweetener. Now, a lot of your big box places that have initiatives already screen on their, like sometimes the application is going to say, have you ever used vocational rehabilitation services? What they're looking for is, ooh, if someone has used vocational rehabilitation services, they're going to qualify for that work opportunity tax credit, and that employer can file the paperwork and get that. For smaller businesses, where it is easier to customize things and be flexible and fit those individual business needs, sometimes that work opportunity tax credit can be a really nice deal sweetener if it's going to be a good job for somebody. So this is just an image of customized employment, that it uses what that employee has to offer. It fits what that employer needs done in their business. And it is a voluntary negotiation. Nobody has to customize a job. The ADA does not require a business to customize a job to create a new position for somebody with a disability. But once someone is hired in a customized position, they're a regular employee. It should meet that same definition of competitive integrated employment. And now they have all the protections under the Americans with Disabilities Act that any other employee would. So this is the general flow of services. If you are a family member, a case manager, someone who cares about somebody with a disability who's looking for work, these are the kind of things that should be happening. And so I'm going to outline what services should look like so that you are aware, so that you can insert yourself, ask questions like, okay, so how are you going to get to know my daughter? Who else do you want to talk to? We'll talk about what that looks like. And you can say, so tell me what businesses you're talking to and why you're talking to that business about my daughter. It is okay for you to ask those questions and to expect an answer that makes sense for that particular job seeker. If you are hearing things like, oh, so you want to go to work, here's 10 employers that we have really good relationships with, which one of those would you be interested in? That's not what you should be hearing, because that doesn't take into account who that person is and what they want. And so when we start with Voc Rehab in Kentucky, we call it person-centered job selection for a reason, right? We start with who that person is, and then we go out and find a good job that's going to be a fit for them. So it starts with that discovery process, that who is this person, getting to know them. Then we get into the job search and planning, knowing what we know about this person. Let's think about businesses that might be a good fit for them. And then that job development, which might include that negotiation of a new position, actually talking with businesses and figuring out what their needs are, and then that hiring process and post-employment support. So the discovery process, really is individualized. It is not a standardized vocational assessment. Kentucky decided RVR service back in 2000, early 2000s, to say, we're not just going to use standardized VOCA evals. We're not just going to use this checklist of where do you want to go? Here are businesses that I know and can help you get a job at, but to really individualize and take that qualitative approach, because we know that standardized vocation evaluations are really good at showing what someone with a significant impact of disability can't do. What they're not great at all the time is showing what that person can do, and that's what we need to know if we're going to help somebody find a job. And so these are some aspects to this discovery process. It is supposed to be active and engaging. It shouldn't just happen at the day program or in somebody's office or in one conversation. It should be full of activity. When it's not COVID, that employment should be out and about, spending time with that job seeker in different places where they are comfortable, in new places. Right now, a lot of things are being done remotely because of COVID, but there should still be as much activity as possible through technology that we can do. It's really getting past those preconceived notions. I can't tell you how many times I've heard, well, everybody knows that Caitlin can't sit still, right? She can't stay on task. She can't focus. She can't, everybody knows that Caitlin's going to spit on new people. So we want to get to those, are there circumstances where Caitlin can stay on task, where she is engaged in what's going on, and then figuring out what's going on at those times when that happens so that we can think about what that might look like in a job. Thinking in questions. My colleague Lori Norton always says, if somebody says, well, I want to work at Taco Bell, I mean, it's true, Taco Bell might be hiring, but what is it about Taco Bell that someone's interested in? And oftentimes it's, well, I know somebody that works there and he's got a cool hat and he gets to eat tacos. Okay, that might be a nice perk for you, but there are lots of other jobs where you might have some pretty good perks as well. So maybe let's think about what else might be a good job fit before we just take that one bit of information and run for it. It's really getting at uncovering these gifts and talents and interests, finding that spark. When does somebody engage in conversation more? When does somebody who's been pretty distant through the process, you can see it in their eyes or in what they're saying or their body language that, hey, this person's really listening to me and what I'm interested in. And if any of you have been through this process, you know when somebody is now suddenly engaged and paying attention, because you're talking to them. You're showing that you care about them as a person and not just all this other system stuff. And so that's what discovery is all about. How do we figure out who this person really is besides just that label of disability so we can find a good job? We're looking for strengths and interests and conditions. Right, stamina, best time of day, they're a good typer, they're good at communication. They like being around other people. They like being around animals or fashion or working in an office or wanting to be outside. And then those conditions for success, the pace, the lighting, the supervisory style, the time of day, the transportation, how you're going to get there, all those other kind of things that we're looking for. And once we compile all that together, then we can start the job search. I can't stress enough that when we're doing supported employment, the first question shouldn't be, so what do you want to do or where do you want to work? It really needs to be, tell me about yourself. What's a typical day look like? What kind of things do you like to do? What do people say that you do well? And then finding other people in their life with permission of the job seeker that you can ask those questions of too. I think it's fair to say for all of us that many of us are not the best at saying what we're really good at or what we need. But if you were to ask some friends of mine, they could tell you what I'm good at and what I need and what's going to be a good fit. So we want to find those other people in someone's life to gain more information from as well, so that then we can really go out and have a plan for the job search rather than just driving up and down Nicholasville Road looking for who's hiring, because we can spend a lot of time filling out applications for places that have help wanted signs out and just never get anywhere. When we individualize the process and our job search plan comes specifically from what we know about that person, now we're targeting where we're going and we can get there saying, I'm here talking to you about Sarah because I believe she can benefit your business in these ways. That's the kind of statement that an employment specialist needs to make. So if you have somebody getting ready to go do job development on behalf of your son or daughter or someone you care about, say, I want to know where you're going, who you're talking to, and why you're going to that particular business, and they should be able to answer that question. This is just one tool that we share with employment specialists to think about. As you can see on the left, what would those ideal work tasks, that ideal setting, those ideal coworkers be for this person? What kind of tasks can you see him doing? And then what business in our area has need of those tasks that fits with what we know about Randy, right? That's how we get to where that job development list, that contact list, is, I call it targeted job development. You know where you're going, what you're looking for, and the left side is all the why. And that's how we get a script to go out and talk to businesses, so that that employer can be an incentive, can be a benefit, a valued employee. So these are some of the questions that I share with employment specialists when they're going out to talk to businesses. There are people who will go out and look for what I call a labor market job. They don't need all that customized stuff. They can go out and apply for a job that they want and compete against other people, and have a chance at getting it. The beauty of an employment specialist is you're hopefully not just filling out that application and then crossing your fingers and praying that somebody sees it and you happen to get called in. The employment specialist should still be going in and talking to that business to find out this kind of information, what kind of work gets done, what's important to them, what are they looking for when they're hiring, what's that hiring process look like, to learn enough, because once they've gotten to know the job seeker, are they going to fit well in this business? Right? So if you learn about the type of work and what's important to them, if this is a business where speed is really important and efficiency and productivity, and you're working with someone who's going to be really accurate, but it's not necessarily going to be fast, that might not be the best business for them, right? Not that they couldn't do the job, but it might not be the best fit. And so you're looking for a place that really focuses on quality over quantity. And there are all kinds of different businesses out there. It's finding the right one for a particular job seeker. And if someone is going out and looking for customized employment, these are the kind of questions they're going to ask. They're not asking what positions do you have open, because you're not applying for an existing position, but you're finding out what's important to that business. And then as you get to know them, it's finding out, so are there things that you need done that might just not happen in as effective way as you want, right? We all know, those of us who are employed, that, I mean, I have pages of to-do lists, and there are some things that might just get transferred to the next list every time, right? Or within our larger place of business. What are those kind of things, and is there a way that this person could meet that unmet need within that workplace? And these are some of the ways that we can ask about that. And so employment specialists learn how to ask these kind of questions and how to make those connections with employers to get this kind of information. And this is where we learn enough about the business to at least believe this could be a good job fit. Nobody can guarantee success. Nobody can guarantee success on the job. But what we can do is stack the deck and increase the likelihood of success by knowing the job seeker well, and then getting to know that place of business to see if it could be a good fit for both. This is Ellie, who works at a YMCA in Louisville. You can see some of the adaptive equipment that she has that VR was able to help her get to enlarge larger screens and scanners to help with her low vision. And then the whys of where she went. And we don't have enough time to get into all of the details of it, but you can see some of the things here that the employment specialist learned about what's important to her, these strong memories she had of being a member of a Y in the community where she grew up. But then also she learned about how she really liked these workbooks and starting with this and moving to the next step. And once you get this one done, then you go on to the next, and then you go on to the next. That very sequential way of doing tasks. There's a starting point, there's an ending point, it's very clear. And then you move on to the next one. And that was how her brain works and how she best processes information and task activity. That's a really important thing to know when we think back to those entry-level service jobs, the example of wiping tables at Wendy's. The work is never done. We're facing grocery shelves, right? You clean a table, it's clean, you move on to the next, somebody sits down and now it's a mess, or they drop something on it. It's not as clear what you've done and what comes next. And that's why I mean that of job fit, and knowing how someone processes information and tasks and finding a place for that. Someone asked if someone needs an accommodation or work adaptation, who pays for that? Ultimately, it is the employer's responsibility. There are times when VR can help pay for that. If someone has access to a Medicaid waiver, there are times that the waiver can pay for that through goods and services. And so it really just kind of depends. And in the case of Ellie, VR did pay for that. And that is a conversation with the VR counselor and what they're going to be able to cover. There's not a one answer that fits every situation. This is another picture of Jake and some of the reasons of why they went to a car dealership for him. These were both customized jobs, and one of the things that both of these places of business, the YMCA and a car dealership, had was he was really interested in being around cars. He doesn't have a mechanic's license or education in it, but he likes to fiddle with cars in some of the buildings on his property. And a car dealership would have access to cars and people who are interested in cars, so they share that interest, but also lots of other types of work than just that mechanic and customer service work. The YMCA has that membership. People go there to exercise and be healthy, right? But there's lots of other business types of things that happen when you have a much wider type of business. There's more possible tasks and ways for people to be of value and to be able to contribute within a business. And so while Jake started by taking out the trash, that was the first sequence of tasks that he did at the car dealership, and had, you can see in this picture, I think some picture cues and sequential things so that he could learn those tasks and know what needed to be done. There were lots of things that could be built on. So once he, it might have taken him 15 hours a week to do that trash at first, but once he learned that task, it didn't take him that long to do it anymore. So we started watering plants and kept adding tasks on. Then he would clean off the cars in the winter. He would start them to make sure, everybody knows cars need to be started every so often. So he got some tasks that had to do with the vehicles himself. Now he has his own office. He's got a computer. He's added all kinds of tasks, but he's been able to have the time that he needs to learn those new tasks rather than having all of them at once. And so that was a really wonderful customized part about his position. And then with supported employment, there's that ongoing support, right? There's someone there to help you learn the job, but really to make sure that you learn it in a way that makes sense for you, to know what the typical orientation and teaching strategy is. So I'm not going to lie, most people at the car dealership don't get a pictorial task list to learn their job. The employment specialist helped with that. They knew what the task was through conversations with the employer, and then they adapted that into a picture list that was going to make sense for Jake in a way that he could follow it. So those are some things that the employment specialist can do that would be above and beyond what an employer would typically do, but working together to make sure that Jake got to know the coworkers. And while the employment specialist created the picture list, it was people at the car dealership that talked to Jake about that list and showed him around the car dealership to learn the sequence of tasks and what he needed to do. So that's the real important, is that our role is to share learning styles and make connections to make sure that people learn from coworkers so that they really are a part of that business and not just that nice person that someone hired that happens to have a disability, right? We really want to avoid that kind of a thing. They can be there to help with consultation. Sometimes you start with a job and down the road you realize as you add more tasks that you need adaptive equipment. And so the employment specialist can help with that. The Job Accommodation Network is a wonderful resource. If you Google Job Accommodation Network, askjan.org, you can type in an impact of disability and it'll give you lots of ideas of potential accommodations for that. So they can help with that kind of thing. But no definition of supported employment in Kentucky is one-on-one job coach forever. That is not what supported employment is. The purpose of spending that upfront discovery time and getting to know someone is to find a job where someone can be as independent as possible and they don't need that employment specialist with them all the time. Now, I know people who, for personal care attendant reasons, have somebody with them, but it's not the employment specialist. it's an aide or an attendant or a DSP in some other role. If somebody needs that job coach with them all the time because they won't do the job or can't do the job, chances are it's not a good job fit, and it might be that they need a different job. And so supported employment can go back and help people find other jobs as well. So these are all people who receive supported employment in Kentucky who were with their coworker, right? It's the coworker offering that support, helping put the gloves on, chit-chatting in the morning and looking over his shoulder at the computer of what needs to be done next. It's not the employment specialist. It's not that disability service provider. It's a coworker, because we all get some sort of help from coworkers in doing our job. I love this quote from Sterling Peebles, has done a lot of work with the Green Mountain Self Advocate. She works at the University of Massachusetts in Boston right now. And in a video she does about employment support, says, thanks for the assistance, but remember, it's my job, not your job. Sometimes really well-intended employment specialists, we just want things to go well so desperately that we do more than is needed. And in doing so, we take that respect away from the supported employee, who it's her job. We just need to make sure things are set up and that she has the supports to be able to do it. So I love this bottom quote, that to provide less support than is needed is unacceptable. If people need that support, we need to figure out how they can get it. But to provide more support than is needed is disrespectful, because the last thing we want is for that employment specialist to look like a glorified babysitter. That does nobody any good. We are getting close to 12 o'clock. And so these are just some other pictures of people who have jobs and different tasks that they do. So if you care about someone getting supported employment, these are some things where you can insert yourself into that process. I mean, I have been around for a while. I know some people have been pretty frustrated with the VR process or the supported employment provider. And so know that it's okay to ask questions. You are always welcome to ask me. My email is on that first slide. I think it's on the last slide as well. So you can reach out to me for some help. This is what's going on. Is this what I should expect, or what can I do about it? And make sure that help that person who's looking for a job know that it's okay to speak up and say, this is what I like and this is what I don't like. I didn't like this place of business that we went and toured, and this is why. Help think about those reasons why it might not have gone well and what could be better in the future. Because we really don't want the employment specialist to kind of have to recreate the wheel. If there are other people that knows that job seeker well, share that information so they can find the best kind of job possible, and help support them in a way that makes sense for them. These are some other links and resources. If you go to employment, these will be active links when you get the slide. But if you go to YouTube and search for employment files, there's a YouTube channel that has all kinds of videos of people with significant disabilities in employment, talking to the employee, to the employer, to the employment specialist. Some probably have family members about what has made this a good job and how the process has gone. So you get lots of different examples there that can be really helpful. Kentucky Works has all kinds of resources about helping people think about employment. And then you have my email address as well. Somebody answered the IPS question. Thank you. I just saw that. It is almost 12 o'clock, so I rambled really longer than I thought I would. So either you're welcome or I do apologize. Are there any other questions? I'd be happy to do that. Or again, you're always welcome to reach me via email and reach out with follow-up questions. I'd be happy to talk with you.
I'm looking right now, Katie, to see if there are any more questions that you didn't answer while you were going through. I think most of them. I think one, maybe you answered this and I may forgot or missed it, but it says, can anyone with a disability get help from Voc Rehab?
I think I did, but the answer is yes. Well, anyone with a disability can apply. You have to be eligible and meet those standards of the eligibility. There are times when they call it order of selection. VR just doesn't have enough money to serve everybody. Federal law requires that they prioritize categories, and people with the most significant impact of disability are the highest priority. So if it's a real mild disability, there are times when you might get put on a waiting list. But you are certainly welcome to apply for services and see. Yes, it is not just people with significant disabilities. VR serves all people with a disability.
Okay, great. I was looking to see if there were any more.
And there was that phone number, or you can just Google Kentucky Office of Vocational Rehabilitation. They're part of the Kentucky Career Center, and you can find who to contact to apply for services.
Great, great. Okay, I'm going to take the presenter reins back from you for a second.
Okay, thank you all.
And make sure that we just let everyone know about our Tuesday tips. We have those every Tuesday and every Thursday. We have webinars on Thursday on a variety of topics, and then we offer our Tuesday tips on Tuesdays at 11, which we also talk about a lot of different topics there, but we do it in more like a tip format. If you want some more information about COVID-19 and education, we have a wonderful webpage that's specifically dedicated to all of that information, which our website will be on the last screen here in just a moment. And we also have an e-news that we send out usually every other week. That has a lot of information about our upcoming webinars. Any information like that, we would love for you to sign up for that. Katie, this was great information. And I love that one of the things that you said that meant a lot to me was, discovery is more than just filling out resumes and driving down Nicholasville Road. And I loved that because I think that is so important, that just because there's a help wanted sign doesn't mean that it's a great fit for everyone. So I love that. Thank you so much for being our guest today. We really appreciate it. And at the end, when you log off, you will be prompted to complete an evaluation. If you would do that for us, we would really appreciate it. Please be honest. It really helps us plan for the future. And know also, if you have some topic ideas that you would like to see us do, we would really appreciate that too. So thank you all so much for joining us. And Katie, thank you. And I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Stay safe.